I never minded closing shifts at Dollar Tree, especially on weeknights. It was slow, almost too slow. We had rushes earlier in the evening, but by the time 9 p.m. rolled around, the place was usually dead. Most of our customers came in right after work, grabbed a few things, and left. The only ones who showed up this late were either last-minute shoppers or people who made me uneasy. I'd been working at this location for about a year, mainly as a cashier, but since it was never that busy, I often did other tasks too, stocking shelves, cleaning up, and making sure nobody trashed the place before closing. Tonight was one of those nights. It was just me and Denise, my co-worker. She was nice, a little older, and always left at 9 p.m. since she had to open the next morning. That meant I was alone for the last hour, which I didn't really mind, usually. I walked her to the door, locking it behind her. "You be careful, all right?" she said, pulling her coat tighter around her. Yeah, I'll be fine. Just gotta kill an hour." I forced a smile. "Call me if anything feels weird," she added before disappearing into the cold. I turned back to the empty store, sighing. The silence was almost suffocating. 50 minutes to go. I decided to start sweeping, hoping I wouldn't get any last-minute customers. But then, the front doors opened. I looked up. A man walked in, tall, broad shoulders, wearing a dark blue jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Something about him made my stomach clench. He didn't look at me. Didn't nod. Didn't say a word. Just turned right and disappeared behind an aisle. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening on the broom handle. "Relax," I muttered to myself. It was probably nothing. I continued sweeping, keeping one eye on the front of the store. Time dragged. 9:55 p.m. I grabbed the store intercom and spoke into it, keeping my voice calm. "Attention shoppers, we'll be closing in 5 minutes. Please bring your items to the register." No response. I leaned over the counter, trying to see if he was in one of the aisles. Nothing. The store was small, just a few aisles, and I should have at least heard movement, but it was dead silent. Something wasn't right. I cleared my throat, trying again. "Sir, we're closing in 3 minutes." Still nothing. Then, at 10 p.m. on the dot, I made the final announcement. "We are now closed. Please come to the register if you have anything to purchase." Silence. I waited another minute, then walked to the entrance and locked the doors. No more customers. Just me and him. I grabbed a small flashlight from under the counter and stepped out from behind the register. "Sir?" I called, walking down the first aisle. Empty. I checked the next one. Nothing. I moved faster, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Where the hell did he go? Then it hit me. The bathrooms. They were tucked away at the back, near the employee break room and storage area. If he was anywhere, he had to be there. I walked down the small hallway leading to the back. The doors were slightly ajar, and the hallway lights flickered. My stomach twisted. As I approached the storage room door, I saw him. He was standing partially hidden, pressed against the wall just out of sight, watching me. My breath caught in my throat. What the fuck? "Sir, the store is closed. You need to leave now." My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. Then, in a split second, he bolted past me, sprinting toward the front of the store. I turned, expecting to hear the doors slam open, but nothing. I didn't hear him leave. The store was dead silent again. I stayed frozen for a few seconds, my body screaming at me to leave, but I had to make sure he was gone. I walked slowly back toward the front. Then, a loud crash from the middle of the store. I spun around just in time to see him hurling a glass jar straight at my head. I barely ducked in time. The jar smashed against the counter behind me, shattering into a million pieces. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I shouted, backing away. The man didn't answer. He was breathing heavily now, staring at me, his hands twitching. I reached for my phone. Another crash. He'd knocked over an entire shelf, sending boxes and cans flying across the floor. I had no idea what he was on, but I wasn't waiting to find out. "Get the hell out or I'm calling the cops," I yelled. No response. Then, just as suddenly as he'd started, he turned and ran out the doors. I exhaled, my hands shaking as I rushed to lock the doors. But then, he ran back inside. I didn't know what to do. He was blocking my only exit. Then he disappeared again. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's a man in my store. He attacked me. He won't leave. My voice shook. Stay on the line. Officers are on the way. Another crash. I heard him laughing now, low and raspy. You shouldn't have locked the doors, he muttered. I bolted, ran straight out the back door into the freezing night. I didn't care if I got written up for leaving the store unattended. I just needed to be out. I stayed in my car, doors locked, watching the store's entrance. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights lit up the parking lot. The cops went in, and after a few minutes, they dragged him out. He was fighting, yelling, spitting at them. One officer walked up to me. You okay? Yeah, just shook up. Guy was tweaking, he said. No ID, but he's been arrested before. Meth, probably. I just nodded. I went back inside after they took him away. The place was wrecked. Broken shelves, shattered glass, spilled merchandise. I had to stay late to clean up, but I was just glad I was alive. And I never worked a closing shift alone again. Some events never fade. Time moves on, but certain memories carve themselves so deeply into your mind that they become a part of you. This is one of those nights. A night that left a permanent mark of fear inside me. This happened during my freshman year of college. I had chosen to live alone in a single-occupancy dorm room. It was small but comfortable, just a bed, a desk, a closet, and a tiny bathroom. The dorm building itself was on the far edge of campus, a bit isolated with only a few other buildings nearby. One of those nearby places was a Dollar Tree store. For a broke college student like me, that store became a lifesaver. Everything was cheap, and I could buy all the essentials, snacks, school supplies, toiletries, without worrying about overspending. I went there at least 2 or 3 times a week, picking up things like notebooks, pens, instant noodles, toothpaste, and soap. Over time, I started recognizing some of the employees. Most of them were friendly but distant, just doing their jobs. But one guy, he was different. At first, I barely noticed him. He was just another store worker, stocking shelves or working the register. But as the weeks went by, I started realizing something. Whenever I was in the store, he was always nearby. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but then it became unsettling. If I was in the snack aisle, he'd be stocking chips a few feet away. If I moved to the school supplies section, he'd suddenly appear, arranging notebooks. And whenever I went to the register to pay, he always seemed to be watching me. He never spoke to me directly. He never smiled. He just watched. I told myself I was overthinking it, that maybe he was just a quiet guy. Maybe this was just how he was. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a regular night. I was in my dorm room, sitting at my desk working on an assignment. My laptop screen glowed in the dim light. The only noise in the room was the low hum of my heater and the soft murmur of my TV, which was on at the lowest volume. Then I heard it. A click. It was faint, coming from the direction of my door. I froze, my fingers hovering over my laptop keyboard. My heart gave a small, uneasy thump. Maybe it was just someone in the hallway, closing their door. Then I heard it again. Click. It wasn't a normal sound. It wasn't the usual thud of a door shutting or the muffled voices of students passing by. This was different. It sounded like someone was testing the handle. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up, my body tense. My room was on the 3rd floor, at the very end of the hallway. Not many people had any reason to be near my door. I took a few silent steps toward it. Then, knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate knock. A chill ran down my spine. Something about it felt wrong. It wasn't like a friend knocking or a casual tap. It was controlled, intentional, like whoever was on the other side was waiting for a response. I swallowed hard. My heartbeat was now hammering in my ears. Taking a deep breath, I leaned forward and peeked through the peephole, and my blood ran cold. Standing directly outside my door, staring straight ahead, was the man from Dollar Tree. My stomach dropped. His face was expressionless, his posture rigid. He wasn't looking around or fidgeting. He was just standing there. My first thought was, why the hell is he here? I didn't even know his name. I had never spoken to him. How did he find my dorm? Had he followed me before? As I stared, he suddenly tried the handle again. My breath caught in my throat. He was trying to get in. I took 2 shaky steps back from the door. My hands were trembling. My first instinct was to call someone, campus security, a friend, anyone. But my phone was on my desk, and I was too scared to move. Then he knocked again, this time louder. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay quiet. Maybe if I didn't make a sound, he'd think I wasn't here and leave. Seconds dragged by, then minutes. I carefully, very carefully, leaned forward and peeked through the peephole again. He was still there, just standing, just waiting. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Then, from down the hall, I heard another door creak open. Instantly, the man turned his head toward the noise. I watched, frozen, as he took one last glance at my door, then slowly walked away. I didn't move for a long time. The next morning, I barely got any sleep. The moment the sun came up, I grabbed my things and went straight to the dorm's front desk. The RA on duty looked up as I approached. "Hey Perry, you okay?" I hesitated, my hands gripping the strap of my backpack. "Something happened last night," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The RA frowned. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath and told him everything. The knock, the way the guy tried my door handle, how long he stood there. By the time I finished, his face had turned serious. "Did you call campus security?" I shook my head. I was too scared to move. I thought he might hear me. He nodded and picked up his phone. "We're checking the security footage." An hour later, I sat in the campus security office, my stomach twisted in knots. A security officer, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, rubbed his chin as he stared at his computer screen. "Well," he said finally, "we got him on camera." He turned the screen toward me. There he was, standing outside my door, trying the handle, waiting. My throat felt dry. "Do you know who he is?" The officer sighed. "Not a student. We're running his face through our system, but if he's not registered anywhere, it'll be hard to track him." I swallowed. "He works at the Dollar Tree near campus." The officer exchanged a look with another security staff member. "That helps. We'll send someone to check it out. In the meantime, keep your door locked, and if you see him again, call us immediately." I nodded, but deep inside I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to that Dollar Tree. A week passed. No updates. No news. It was as if the man had just vanished. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he had planned something that night. The way he stood there for so long. The way he kept testing the door. The worst part? I never found out how he knew where I lived. Had he followed me? Had he watched me walk back to my dorm? Had he been tracking me for weeks? I'll never know. But I do know this. If my door hadn't been locked that night, I might not be here to tell this story. I wasn't planning on going out that night. It was late, and I had just settled into my couch after a long shift. My apartment was quiet, the TV playing some random show I wasn't paying attention to. But then I remembered. It was my sister's birthday in a couple of days, and I still hadn't gotten her a card. I sighed, rubbing my face. I could get one tomorrow, but I knew if I put it off, I'd forget. So, I grabbed my keys and decided to make a quick run to Dollar Tree, which was about 10 minutes away. It was the closest store open at this hour, and I figured I'd be in and out in 5 minutes. I pulled on my hoodie, slipped into my SUV, and backed out of my apartment's small parking lot. The streets were quiet, mostly empty, with just the occasional car passing by. The night had that eerie stillness to it, the kind that makes you feel like you're the only person awake in the whole city. When I pulled into the Dollar Tree parking lot, it was nearly deserted. A couple of cars were scattered around, but the place was mostly empty. The store's neon green sign flickered slightly, buzzing against the silence. I stepped inside, greeted by the artificial brightness of fluorescent lights. The air smelled like cheap plastic and cleaning supplies. The store wasn't big, just a few aisles lined with snacks, seasonal decorations, and household items. A tired-looking cashier stood behind the counter scrolling on her phone. She barely glanced at me. I walked over to the greeting card section, flipping through them. Most were corny, but after a couple of minutes I found one I liked. As I turned to head to the register, I got this weird feeling like someone was watching me. I glanced around. There was a man near the back of the store pretending to look at some household items. He was wearing a dark hoodie, his face mostly hidden. Something about him felt off. I shrugged it off, paid for my card, and left. The parking lot was even quieter than before. A cold breeze made me pull my hoodie tighter. As I reached my SUV, I unlocked it, climbed into the driver's seat, and tossed the bag onto the passenger seat. I started the car, my music automatically connecting to Bluetooth. As I pulled out of the lot, I turned it up, letting the familiar beats fill the silence. About halfway home, I heard something. A dull thump. I turned the music down slightly, listening. Nothing. I figured it was probably just something shifting in the back. I had a couple of things in the trunk, a spare jacket, some old grocery bags. Then I heard it again, a distinct shuffling noise. My heart started beating faster. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing looked out of place. Then, movement. A head rose from the far back, just behind the second row of seats. For a brief second, I locked eyes with a man, a stranger. He had wide, unblinking eyes, dark and sunken. His hood was up, partially hiding his face, but I could see just enough. He was staring right at me. I screamed. Panic took over. My hands tightened on the wheel as I instinctively swerved to the side of the road. The car jerked violently, my tires skidding on the asphalt. I barely managed to avoid hitting a ditch before I slammed on the brakes. My body was shaking, my breath coming in short gasps. For a split second, everything was silent. Then, the sound of the back door unlocking. I grabbed my keys, yanked them out of the ignition, and threw the door open. I ran. I didn't even think. My feet just moved. Behind me, I heard the SUV's back door swing open. Then, footsteps. I glanced back. The man had jumped out. He was running after me. I took off down the dark road, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. On either side, there was nothing but woods and open fields. I wasn't fast, but I was running for my life. Branches slapped my face as I crashed into the woods, my shoes sinking into the soft earth. I could still hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding against the ground, his breathing getting heavier. He was close. I pushed forward, adrenaline surging through my veins. I dodged trees, stumbled over roots, my heart slamming against my ribs. Then, a light, a small, distant glow. A house. I sprinted toward it, not caring if I looked crazy. I reached the front porch and started pounding on the door. "Help! Please! Someone's chasing me!" No answer. I turned back. The woods were dark, silent. Too silent. Was he still there, watching, waiting? Then, the door creaked open. A woman, maybe in her 50s, stood there. She looked at me suspiciously. "What? Please," I gasped. "Call the police. There's a man. He was in my car. He chased me." She didn't open the door all the way. She hesitated, eyeing me up and down. I realized how I must have looked. Sweaty, out of breath, wide-eyed. She started shaking her head. I don't think... I heard something move behind me. My stomach dropped. "Just call the police," I begged. She finally nodded, pulling out her phone. I kept my eyes on the woods. Every shadow looked like him. Every rustling leaf sent my pulse into overdrive. Finally, after what felt like forever, flashing red and blue lights appeared down the road. The police searched the area. My SUV was still where I left it, its back door wide open. The man, gone. The officers checked my car. They found footprints in the trunk. He had been waiting there the entire time. I must have left my doors unlocked when I went into Dollar Tree. That's the only way he could have gotten in. The police took my statement, but there wasn't much else they could do. To this day, I don't know what his intentions were. Robbery, kidnapping, something worse. I never saw his face again. But sometimes when I drive alone at night, I still glance in my rearview mirror, just to make sure no one's back there. I never thought working at Dollar Tree would lead to something like this. Sure, customers could be annoying, even rude, but this was something different. Something that stayed with me long after I clocked out. Back then, I was just trying to make some extra cash while figuring out my next steps in life. My name's Rachel, and at the time I was 22, working mostly weekends and some late shifts at a Dollar Tree in Pinefield, Ohio, a small town where not much ever happened. Or at least that's what I used to think. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind that makes your shift feel endless. The store was packed. Families grabbing cheap party supplies, older ladies counting out exact change, impatient guys buying energy drinks and junk food. We only had 4 registers, and mine had a line that never seemed to shrink. I was in a rhythm, scan, bag, repeat, when a man stepped up to my register. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Something about him felt off. Not in an obvious way, just a feeling that made my stomach tighten a little. But I was polite. I had to be. "Hey there," he said, flashing a grin. "How's your day going, sweetheart?" I gave him a quick, polite smile as I scanned his items. A pack of gum, a cheap lighter, and a bottle of off-brand soda. "Good. You?" "Better now." He leaned on the counter, watching me too closely. "You always work Saturdays?" That question, the way he asked it, like he was filing away the information. Yeah, sometimes." I kept my voice neutral. "Lucky me, huh? Maybe I should start shopping here more often." He chuckled, but it didn't feel like a joke. "When you getting off? Maybe we could hang out." I stiffened. This wasn't small talk anymore. "I've got plans after work," I lied, hoping that would shut it down. "Come on, don't be like that." He leaned in a little. "Just a quick bite or something. Promise I won't bite." The line behind him was growing, people shifting impatiently. I needed him to move on. "Sorry, I gotta keep the line moving." I gestured to the customers waiting. He studied me, his smile fading just slightly. Then finally he grabbed his bag and stepped aside. "I'll see you around, Rachel." My stomach twisted. I hadn't told him my name. Hours passed. The rush died down. By 8 p.m. the store was almost empty, the only sound the hum of the refrigerators in the back and the occasional beep of my scanner. And then I saw him. He walked in, not even pretending to shop, not looking at the aisles, not picking up a basket. He was coming straight for me. I felt my pulse jump. He stopped at my register, his hands resting on the counter like we were mid-conversation. "Changed your mind yet?" His voice was lower this time, less playful. "No," I said firmly. His eyes narrowed slightly, his fingers tapping against the counter. "You know, I don't like being ignored." That's when my manager, Lisa, noticed. She was an older woman, tough but kind. She stepped up beside me, arms crossed. "Something wrong here?" she asked, voice sharp. The man didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine for a few seconds before he finally exhaled, smirking. "Nah, just chatting with my favorite cashier." He turned and walked out. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Lisa turned to me. "You know him?" I shook my head. "Number. But he won't take no for an answer." Her expression hardened. If he comes back, we're banning him." I nodded, grateful, but inside, something still felt wrong. 3 nights later, I was back for another shift, a short one, 6 to 10 p.m. It was quiet, barely any customers. At around 9 p.m., just when I started to feel like maybe I'd overreacted, he came back. This time, he didn't smile. He didn't pretend to be friendly. He walked right up to my register, eyes cold, voice low. "I know where you live." My breath caught. "What?" He tilted his head like he was enjoying this. "I followed you home the other night." He shrugged. "Nice place. Quiet street. Not a lot of people around." My hands gripped the counter. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. Lisa saw him again and stormed over. "That's it. I'm calling the cops." The man didn't even argue this time. He just smirked again and walked out. But the moment he was gone, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Had he really followed me? I thought back. Had I seen any cars behind me that night? Noticed anyone watching? I had no idea. Lisa called the police anyway. When they showed up, I told them everything. They took my statement, asked me for details, but I could tell there wasn't much they could do. No crime had been committed. Not yet. I never saw him again. Maybe the police showing up scared him off. Maybe he moved on to some other target. Maybe he was still watching, just better at hiding. I don't know. For weeks I watched my rear-view mirror when I drove home. Every noise outside my apartment made my stomach drop. I never worked a closing shift alone again. But the worst part? The not knowing. Did he really follow me home? Or was he just saying it to mess with me? I'll never know. And somehow that's even worse. I wasn't planning on staying long at Dollar Tree that night. It was late, just past 9:30 p.m., and the store was set to close at 10. I had a short list of things to grab: toothpaste, a couple of cleaning supplies, and maybe some snacks. Dollar Tree wasn't my usual go-to, but I knew from experience that you could find some decent deals if you looked hard enough, especially at night when the store was practically empty. The parking lot was mostly deserted when I pulled in. A few cars sat scattered around, but none of them looked occupied. Inside, the store was quiet, eerily so. There was no music playing, just the distant sound of an employee moving things around in the back. I spotted another customer near the entrance when I first walked in, a middle-aged woman browsing the holiday decorations, but after that, I didn't see anyone. I grabbed a small basket and started making my way through the aisles, moving with purpose. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting a harsh, almost sterile glow over the shelves. There was something unsettling about being in a nearly empty store so close to closing time. The silence had weight to it, like the store itself was watching. I had just grabbed a bottle of dish soap when I heard it. Something shifting on the aisle over. A soft scraping sound, like a box being moved. I froze for a second, listening. Nothing. Brushing it off as my imagination, I continued toward the toothpaste aisle. As I turned the corner, my eyes landed on something that made my stomach drop. A box. One of those large cardboard display boxes was shifting ever so slightly against the bottom shelf. At first, I thought maybe I had just bumped into it with my basket, but then I noticed something else. A foot. Barely visible, peeking out from behind the box. I took an instinctive step back, my heart kicking up a notch. Slowly, I leaned forward just enough to peer behind the box. That's when I saw him. A man was curled up on the bottom shelf, his body wedged awkwardly between the products and the pillar beside it. He was hidden well. If I hadn't caught the movement, I never would have noticed him. He wasn't facing me, but he had to know I was there. For a split second, I considered saying something. Are you okay? Or do you need help? But something about the way he was lying there, completely still except for his slow breathing, sent a chill through me. I didn't want to know why he was there. I didn't want to find out what he was waiting for. I turned on my heel and walked away, gripping my basket tight. My pulse hammered in my ears as I made my way toward the front of the store. I needed to check out. I needed to get out of there. As I approached the register, I spotted a young female employee wiping down the conveyor belt. She looked tired, like she was ready to lock up and go home. I hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Hey, I think there's a guy hiding in one of the aisles," I said, keeping my voice low. Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "He's lying on the bottom shelf behind a box, back by the toothpaste." The girl exchanged a look with her coworker, a guy stacking gum packets by the counter. He sighed and rolled his eyes like this wasn't the first time they'd dealt with something weird. "Show me," she said. I wasn't thrilled about going back down that aisle, but I also didn't want to just leave without saying anything. I led her toward the spot, keeping a safe distance as she moved the box to get a better look. The man was still there. At first, he didn't move. Then, as if sensing he'd been caught, he slowly uncurled himself and stood up. He was taller than I expected, lanky with sunken eyes and a scruffy beard. His clothes were wrinkled, his jacket stained. But it was his expression that got me. His face was completely blank. Not embarrassed, not startled. Just empty. The employee stiffened. "Sir, are you okay?" The man didn't respond. He just stared at her for an uncomfortable amount of time before brushing past us and walking toward the exit. The girl exhaled sharply, shaking her head. That was weird as hell. I nodded, watching as the man stepped out into the parking lot. Yeah, really weird. We stood there for a moment before she shrugged. Well, at least he's gone now. But I wasn't so sure. I paid for my stuff quickly and headed out to my car. The parking lot was even emptier now, just a few cars still parked near the entrance. I hurried to my car, loading my bags into the back seat before sliding into the driver's seat. Just as I was about to start the engine, there was a sharp knock at my window. I flinched and turned my head. It was him, the man from inside the store. He was standing right next to my driver's side window, staring at me. His expression was different now, more intense. He was knocking harder than necessary, his knuckles rapping against the glass in a way that made my stomach twist. My first instinct was to roll the window down, but something in the back of my mind screamed no. Instead, I shook my head at him, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. He didn't. Instead, he reached for my door handle. Panic surged through me as I hit the lock button again, even though I was pretty sure the doors were already locked. His fingers pulled at the handle, yanking it a few times before he leaned closer, pressing his face to the glass. "Open up," he muttered. His voice was muffled but sharp. My breath hitched. I fumbled to shift the car into reverse, my hands shaking. As soon as I started backing up, he grabbed onto the side of the car, his fingers curling around the edge of the window. I slammed my foot on the gas. The sudden movement forced him to let go, and as I peeled out of the parking lot, I saw him stumble backward, his face twisting in frustration. I didn't stop driving until I was a few miles away, my heart still hammering against my ribs. I don't know what that man wanted. Maybe he was just trying to scare me. Maybe he was looking for a ride. Or maybe it was something worse. All I know is that I never went back to that Dollar Tree again. And I never will. I didn't stop driving until I was well out of that neighborhood, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My heart was still hammering, my chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths. I checked my rearview mirror more times than I could count, half expecting to see the man's silhouette lurking behind me in the distance. I didn't, but that didn't mean I felt safe. At a red light, I finally let myself take a deep breath. My mind was racing, replaying every detail of what had just happened. How the hell did I let it get that far? I should have just driven off the moment he knocked on my window. I should have never rolled it down, even slightly. And then a much worse thought hit me. What if my doors had been unlocked? That question sent a cold shiver down my spine. If I hadn't instinctively locked them when I got in, would he have just yanked the door open and climbed in? Would he have tried to rob me? Attack me? Would I have even made it out of that parking lot? I didn't want to think about it. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station parking lot, somewhere well lit with plenty of people around. I sat there for a while, my hands still trembling slightly as I tried to calm myself down. I kept glancing around, scanning the area for any sign of that man. I knew it was irrational. He wasn't here. He had no way of following me. But logic didn't stop the fear from creeping in. After a few minutes, I pulled out my phone and texted a friend. "Something really fucking weird just happened. I think some guy at Dollar Tree tried to grab me." The response was almost immediate. "WTF? Are you okay? Where are you?" I hesitated before replying. "I'm fine, just freaked out, sitting at a gas station trying to calm down." My friend told me to come over, and for the first time in a while I actually listened. I didn't want to go straight home. I didn't want to be alone. That night stuck with me longer than I expected. I told myself it was just a random encounter, that the guy was probably homeless or mentally unstable, and that I'd just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the truth was, I didn't know his intentions. I didn't know what would have happened if things had gone just a little differently. After that night, I changed some things about the way I moved. I stopped going to stores alone that late at night, unless it was absolutely necessary. And if I had to, I made sure I was hyper-aware of my surroundings. I never sat in my car in a dark parking lot for longer than necessary. If I needed to check my phone, I did it with the doors locked and the engine running. Or better yet, I waited until I was in a safer location. I stopped rolling my window down for strangers. Period. If someone knocks, I don't engage. If they really need something, they can say it through the glass, and most importantly, I always lock my doors the second I get inside my car. I never went back to that Dollar Tree. Even months later, if I happened to drive past it, I felt that uneasy sensation in my stomach. It's strange how one brief encounter can change the way you see the world. I don't know what that man wanted that night. Maybe he was just desperate, maybe he was dangerous, or maybe he was just messing with me. But I do know one thing. I wasn't going to let myself be that vulnerable ever again. I had never been much of a night owl, but that summer, I found myself staying out later than usual. I had just turned 19, fresh out of high school, and with college still a few months away, I had nothing but time on my hands. Most nights, I spent hanging out at my buddy Jake's place, playing video games, watching dumb YouTube videos, or just killing time. His parents didn't care if I stayed late, so I usually didn't check the clock until my eyes started burning from staring at the screen too long. That particular night, I left Jake's house around 10:30 p.m. He lived just a few blocks from me, so I always walked home. The streets were mostly quiet, the occasional car passing by, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was the kind of town where everything shut down early, except for the bars and a few fast food places. As I walked, I realized how dry my throat was. I hadn't had anything to drink for hours, and the summer heat still lingered in the air. That's when I noticed the Dollar Tree on the corner up ahead. I had passed by it a million times, but had never actually been inside. It wasn't the nicest looking store, kind of run down with faded signs and a few flickering lights near the entrance. But it was the only place around, so I figured I'd stop in and grab a drink. I didn't even think twice as I walked up to the entrance and pulled the door open. And that's when the weirdness started. Something felt. Office. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed how quiet it was. Too quiet. No background music, no hum of conversation, just complete stillness. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, and about half of them were turned off, casting shadows in random corners of the store. I took a few steps forward, expecting to see an employee stocking shelves or maybe another customer wandering around. But there was no one. The place wasn't messy exactly, but it had that forgotten feeling, like it had been left unattended for too long. The air inside was stale, and it smelled faintly of something I couldn't quite place, like cardboard and something. Sour. Still, I didn't think much of it. Maybe they were short-staffed. I just needed a drink, and then I'd be on my way. I walked to the back where the refrigerated drinks were. The cooler hummed loudly as I grabbed a bottle of Gatorade, the coldness feeling good in my hand. Turning back toward the front, I made my way to the register. And that's when I realized something strange. The counter was completely empty. No one was there. I stopped in my tracks, confused. I had assumed someone was working, but there wasn't a cashier in sight. I set my drink down on the counter and leaned forward slightly, trying to see if anyone was in the small employee area behind the register. Nothing. There wasn't even a back room visible, just a narrow space behind the counter with a dusty old monitor and a few scattered receipts. That's when the uneasiness started creeping in. I glanced around the store again. No employees, no customers, no sound except for the buzzing of the lights and the distant hum of the cooler behind me. Was I really alone? I took a step back, about to turn and leave when, "You ready to check out?" The voice came from directly behind me. I jumped and spun around so fast I nearly knocked over the drink. Standing behind the register was a man. Where did he come from? He hadn't been there a second ago, I was sure of it. But now there he was, staring at me with this weird, expressionless look. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, with a pale, almost grayish complexion. His uniform, a green Dollar Tree vest over a plain white shirt, looked wrinkled and dirty, like he had been wearing it for too long. Something about him was wrong. His eyes were a little too wide, and his smile, if you could even call it that, wasn't quite right. It was more like his lips were just barely curled up, like he was forcing himself to mimic an expression he didn't really feel. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. Yeah, I muttered, reaching for my wallet. My hands felt weirdly cold, even though it was warm inside. The man didn't move as I fumbled for my cash. He just stood there, staring. I placed a $5 bill on the counter. He didn't reach for it right away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, just a little too far to the side. Then slowly he picked up the money, rang up my drink, and handed me the receipt. I took it without looking at him. Something in my gut told me not to. "Thanks," I mumbled, grabbing my Gatorade and stepping back. The moment I turned away, he was gone. He disappeared. I stopped, my heart hammering in my chest. The register was empty again. I looked around frantically, expecting to see him walking away, but there was no one there. I took a step back toward the counter and peered behind it. Nothing. A chill ran down my spine. I had just seen him. I took a shaky breath, telling myself maybe I had just missed him walking away. Maybe there was a back room I hadn't noticed. I turned toward the door, my only thought now being to get the hell out of there. As I stepped outside, I instinctively glanced back and froze. He was watching me. The man was standing outside now, about 10 feet from the entrance. His expression hadn't changed. His lips were still curled in that wrong smile, his head still slightly tilted. He was just staring at me. I didn't wait. I turned and started walking fast. My apartment was only a few blocks away, and I wasn't about to stick around to see what happened next. As I walked, I fought the urge to look back. My entire body was tense, like I was expecting to hear footsteps behind me. I finally gave in when I reached the next intersection. He was gone. The sidewalk in front of Dollar Tree was empty. No sign of him. But the store was dark. The lights inside were off, completely, like the place had been closed for hours. I felt my breath catch in my throat. That wasn't possible. I had just been inside. I had just bought something. I walked home in silence that night, my mind racing, my body on edge. The next morning I checked online. Dollar Tree closed at 9 p.m. every night. I had been there past 10:30 p.m. And that man, I don't think he was ever supposed to be there at all. I barely slept that night. No matter how much I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the whole thing, my mind wouldn't let it go. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wrong smile, those two wide eyes, the way he had just appeared and disappeared like he had never been there at all. And the store. How the hell had I walked inside when it was supposed to be closed? I checked my phone at least 10 times, confirming over and over that the time I had left Jake's house made it impossible for the store to have been open when I got there. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless sleep. The next day, I woke up feeling groggy and disoriented. Sunlight streamed through my window, making last night feel distant, almost like a dream. But it wasn't. I could still feel the chill in my bones, the unease curling in my stomach. I grabbed my phone and stared at the receipt from last night. The timestamp read 10:42 p.m. That sent another wave of cold through me. I had actual proof that I had been inside the store after closing. Something wasn't right. I needed to go back. Later that afternoon, after debating whether or not I was being ridiculous, I finally decided to head back. Not at night, never at night, but while the sun was still up, when the store was actually open. I wanted to see if the place felt different in daylight. The first thing I noticed when I got there was that it looked normal. Cars were parked out front. The doors were open. Customers were going in and out like any other day. For a second, I almost convinced myself that last night had just been a weird, half-awake hallucination. But when I stepped inside, something still felt off. The air smelled the same. That weird mix of cardboard and something stale. The store was still dimly lit, even though all the lights were technically on. And when I walked up to the register, my stomach dropped. Because behind the counter, ringing up a customer, was a completely different cashier. A middle-aged woman, short, with graying brown hair. Not him. I waited in line, my heart pounding, and when it was my turn, I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice casual. Hey, do you guys have a tall guy working here? Kinda pale, dark hair? The woman blinked at me, confused. Tall guy? Yeah, he was working last night when I came in around 10:30. Her expression changed immediately. The confusion on her face deepened, and for a moment, she just stared at me like I had spoken in another language. Honey, we close at 9 every night. I swallowed. I know, but I was in here past 10, and there was a guy at the register. I bought a drink. I pulled out my phone, about to show her the receipt, but she cut me off. No, you didn't. Her tone was firm now. I froze. What? She shook her head. This store has been closing at 9 o'clock sharp for years. No one's here after that. If you were in here past 10, then... She trailed off, her lips pressing together like she didn't want to finish the sentence. My skin crawled. I turned my phone around and showed her the receipt anyway. She stared at it. And then... She went pale. Her hands, which had been resting on the counter, visibly trembled. She inhaled sharply, her eyes darting toward the back of the store like she expected someone to be watching. I don't know how you got this, she said, her voice lower now. But you need to forget about it. I stared at her. What do you mean? She looked around again, then leaned in slightly. You didn't buy that drink here, and whoever you saw, her voice wavered. It wasn't one of us. A heavy silence settled between us. I swallowed hard, suddenly not wanting to be in the store anymore. I muttered a quick, okay, and backed away from the register. But as I turned to leave, she spoke again. A whisper this time. Don't come back at night. I walked out, my skin crawling. That night, I stayed home. I didn't tell Jake. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat in my room, staring at the receipt, playing the events over and over in my mind. But as the hours ticked by and midnight rolled around, something weird started happening. I kept hearing shuffling sounds outside my apartment. Soft, almost deliberate footsteps. At first I thought it was my neighbors, but then I noticed something strange. The footsteps weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from outside my window. I lived on the second floor. My body went rigid. I turned my head slowly, my breath catching in my throat. There, standing on the sidewalk across the street, just barely illuminated by the glow of a distant street lamp, was the man from Dollar Tree. He was just standing there, not moving, just staring up at my window. My stomach dropped. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking, but before I could even unlock it, the power in my apartment went out. Everything went dark. The air felt heavier, like the very atmosphere had thickened. I was not alone in that room. Somewhere in the pitch black, I heard a faint, unnatural whisper. It wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was coming from inside. Right, behind. Mister, I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just ran. I sprinted out of my bedroom without looking back. The only light in the apartment came from my phone's screen, shaking in my grip as I fumbled to call someone, anyone, but the signal was gone. Come on, I muttered, pressing random buttons in panic. My breath was coming out in short, ragged gasps, and my ears were ringing from the pounding of my own heartbeat. Behind me in the darkness, I heard shuffling. Something was moving in my room. No, not moving, sliding, like someone was dragging their feet across the floor. I reached the front door, grabbed the handle, and yanked. Locked. My fingers trembled as I twisted the deadbolt, but the knob refused to turn. It was like someone was holding it from the other side. And then, a whisper, right against my ear. You came inside when you shouldn't have. I screamed. Blind panic took over, and I threw myself at the door, slamming my body into it again and again until, bang! It flew open and I tumbled into the hallway, gasping. The lights in the building flickered violently. My neighbors' doors remained shut. No one else was awake. No one had heard me screaming. I spun around just in time to see my front door slowly closing on its own. And through the shrinking gap, I caught a final glimpse of the darkness inside. There was a shape standing there, tall, motionless, watching me. The door clicked shut. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I ran. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I rode my bike across town to Jake's house, banged on his door like a maniac, and forced my way inside the second he opened it. Jesus, dude, what the hell? He asked, groggy from sleep. I couldn't answer. My hands were still shaking. When I finally calmed down enough to explain, he just stared at me. That's messed up, he said slowly. You sure you weren't just... I'm not crazy, Jake. I didn't say that, He hesitated. You said the store was closed when you went in, right? Yeah. And the guy behind the register, he wasn't real, Jake. My voice cracked. The lady at the store basically told me he doesn't exist. Jake's face darkened. Then, after a long pause, he exhaled. Okay, let's figure this out. I didn't know what he meant at first, but then I watched as he grabbed his laptop and started typing. After a few minutes, he turned the screen toward me. My stomach dropped. There, on an old local news website, was a story. A Dollar Tree employee found dead behind the register, murdered during a late-night robbery. The suspect was never caught. I swallowed hard, my pulse pounding in my ears. The article was from 5 years ago, and when I scrolled down, looking for a photo of the victim, it was him. The tall, pale man, the man who had rung up my drink, the man who had followed me home. A chill ran down my spine. Jake looked at me. You walked into that store when you weren't supposed to. I barely heard him. My eyes were glued to the screen. The article ended with a chilling detail. The store had closed permanently after the murder. It had never reopened. So how the hell did I walk inside? I never went near that Dollar Tree again. Jake and I agreed to never talk about it. I moved out of that apartment a month later, into a place on the other side of town. For a while, things were fine. But then one night, months later, I was driving home from work when I passed by the old store. The building was boarded up now, completely abandoned. But as I stopped at the red light in front of it, my breath caught in my throat, because standing outside the doors in the same spot as that first night was a tall, pale man. He was staring at me. But this time, He was smiling. The light turned green. I floored it. I didn't look back, and I never drove past that store again.